On Media Review segment here on Insight, we shall be beaming our spotlight on sporting reporting in Nigeria. How far, so far? Well, to do justice to this, I have a veteran sports journalist with me on set, one who has covered the World Cup and Nations Cup. I believe so many other big sporting events in the world over. He was the general manager of NTA Sports and presently the general manager NTA International. Help me welcoming Abdulraman Ibn Mohammed. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you, Cecile. How are you?
Fine, thank you. I believe you have quite an impressive resume in sport reporting in Nigeria. I just mentioned just two big ones. Which other one would have you done?
Well, yes, by the grace of God, I've been privileged to have covered the Olympics, several editions of the World Cup, Africa Cup of Nations, some Champions League matches, African Champions League matches, loads of national sports festivals, and a lot of championships too.
I know, you have quite an intimidating resume there. The World Cup has ended. Media reviews, updates have been quite impressive. That brings me to wonder, the coverage and reportage of local sports and talent don't seem to receive as much hype. Not even half of the hype. I believe maybe you'd say it's a little different. What would you say is the case?
Well, certainly there is no comparison. The reportage of the World Cup, as we have just seen in the just ended Russia 2018, and the local reportage for a variety of reasons. First and foremost, the World Cup is easily the biggest sporting spectacle on earth, leaving the Olympics out of it. But getting and catching more eyeballs, the World Cup is by far the biggest sporting spectacle on earth. Advertisers are running after it. Our sponsors are running after it. So the interest is global, so to speak, given to the adage that it is a World Cup. So there is no comparison on that basis. I think this is the same thing in all other climes. In the West and parts of Asia, they report cricket big time because that is a special sport for them. But it comes nowhere to the World Cup because practically everybody, maybe at least 50% of the population, has an interest in the World Cup. National pride is at stake and so on and so forth. Conversely, the reportage of our local sports does not earn that much interest for a variety of reasons. Number one, yes. Number one, like I said, the World Cup is an economic venture, a financial venture. Sponsors and advertisers are onto it. So even if somebody does not have the natural affinity to football, at least his or her bread is coming through that one way or the other. So that gets interest. But to the local sportage reportage, you discover that we do not have the mileage that the World Cup generates for a variety of reasons, chief of which is the fact that none of our local sports is really money spinning. That's number one. Two, the sponsors and advertisers don't go too much into it. Easily the biggest thing that attracts attention in these climes, in this country, is football. But if you ask people who run the Nigerian Football Federation or the LMC, which runs the Nigerian National League, they are struggling to get sponsors onto it. The major companies that ought to be sponsoring the leagues are not there. A short example, the Premiership in England or the La Liga in Spain, where practically every household in Nigeria that has youths that are interested in football, you see them talking about it, you see them viewing it. The local league does not command that. The big companies in Nigeria don't
well, it's possible if the media, if it's giving much hype, maybe talent and the local media give much hype to local talents and sports. Well, some of the sponsors, little by little, drop by drop, they will keep coming around, and somehow we can all gather in a stadium or we can all gather in a viewing center and review this and, you know, talk about these guys.
I was getting to that. The local media does not have the wherewithal to be able to follow, in some cases, these sporting developments, not to talk of giving it the sufficient hype that might get those sponsors interested. You see, it's a give and take scenario. If the big companies, the sponsors, the advertisers are in it, they'll find a way getting across to the media. Because when you perfect a product, the Premiership is almost a product of hyping, because the product has been perfected. Not until the product is perfected. In about 25-30 years ago, Nigerian stadia were filled to capacity. Onikan would be filled to capacity when Stationary Stores was playing, or Lagos Nepa, or Edo Stadium in Benin when Bendel Insurance was playing, or the Mighty Jets of Jos, or Standard of Jos in Jos. So at that point in time, it could be easily sellable. But these days, at some point in time, I resided in Lagos, and big as the National Stadium or the Onikan Stadium could be, some miscreants will just come in at the top of the stands. They will, they're throwing water down at people. Sometimes even urinating from upstairs to hit people. No. So, reasonable people, gentlemen, families that will want to come to the stadium and sit down and watch, we are driven away by such antics. People come to smoke hemp and so on and so forth. So the environment is not conducive for people. All this serve to put away potential sponsors, potential spectatorship, because the advertiser and the money people will want to put in their money where they will get the eyeballs.
Okay, let's move on to something else. Sports fans are about one of the most knowledgeable followers we have around. They know almost everything about the sports they follow. Would you say the sports writers, journalists are as knowledgeable, or even more, so as to set an agenda for discourse among sports and fans?
I dare say Nigerian sports writers and journalists are among the most enlightened and vibrant in the world. But the snag here is that quite a number of them know more about foreign sportsmen and women, especially footballers, than they do know about local Nigerian players. At some point in time, I was talking to you about the 80s and 90s. Some of us could sit down and tell you, if Rangers of Enugu would be playing today, I could name 8 or 9 players in the starting lineup. If Mighty Jets of Jos will be playing, I could sit down and give you the same thing, or Stationary Stores. Today it's not the same. There are very few proactive people who report the Nigerian league and Nigerian sports in general. Most of the hyping is done for sports outside, and that, I think, is something that is worrisome. It calls for more training. The media, both television and print, should really get down to work. There should be more dedication. People now just like the flashes and so on and so forth. They don't really want to dig in. I've just given you an example of what we were able to do in the past, not only for football, for even athletics or games like basketball or volleyball. You could just sit down and say, okay, the Plateau Peaks of Jos in basketball would have X and X coming in. The Ibn Mohammed of Abeokuta will come in with X and X. And the difference will be, maybe give or take 10-15%. Because we were, going together. But now the difference is clear. The infiltration of foreign sports, the infiltration of cable TV and so on and so forth has really divided our attention. And so long as we do not combine to bring it up all together, we may be just, beating about the bush. The last point that I want to make on that is that the people who run our sports too aren't as dedicated as the previous ones. Today we do not have the likes of Isaac Akioye, Awoture Elaye, and the rest of them. Those were dedicated sports organizers and people who superintended over our sports. Today, it is a different ball game. We don't have square pegs
in square holes
and so on and so forth. And sponsors and generally people who want to put in their money will be a little bit wary.
Okay, I'm going to ask you one last question, the double-barreled question. Yeah. I expect you to do this in about 60 seconds. What would you say in your experience as a sporting journalist has been most challenging for you, and what would you advise the government to focus a little more on to give more spotlight besides sports in Nigeria? Very briefly.
In terms of sports organization, again, I was just calling for round pegs in round holes or square pegs in square holes from the top of the sporting ministry and people who direct our sports. there should be specialization. Should be people who know what they are doing. Otherwise, we'll be getting policies that will be clashing with each other. That's one. Two, down the ladder of sports administration, also we should get professionals in such a way that sponsors will not be afraid to put in their money. And Nigerian journalists, the people who run the media, television and the print, should endeavor to provide their staff with more training.
All right, thank you very much, Abdulraman Ibn Mohammed. He's the general manager in TA International. He's a sports veteran, as you've heard him say at the beginning of the show. The program is still Insight. I hope it's been an insightful time. In a moment, I'll be back with Omini to round up the program.
Right on time, Cecile. It's about time to go.
Yeah, it's about time to go, and it's good to know that we've taken our viewer on the tour of Nigeria in different areas.
Sports, transportation, and the
hospitality industry. I just hope in the future we'll have tourists come into Nigeria for sports.
You now know that even if you want to open a booker, you need somewhere to be trained on how you render service. So if you underrated it before, we now have an enabling act to check that. Don't just pick up and think you start somewhere. You must go to Naihoto to get updated. What do you say?
I should look for them for my business. Naihoto, here I come. Thank you very much for being there. My name is Cecile.
Always be part of Insight. On behalf of all of us, bye-bye.